speaker is going to be Dustin Duffy, Gopher Tortoise Movement and Habitat Associations on Working Forest Landscapes. Here's your pointer.
So, good afternoon, everyone.
You got to.
Oh, crap, yeah. Sorry.
We're recording.
Yeah. Hello. Is it on? Hello? Oh, there it is. So, good afternoon, everyone. So, today I'm going to be presenting my bachelor's research at Mississippi State University. So, I'm working with Weyerhaeuser Company, working to see how tortoises or operational forestry impacts gopher tortoise populations. So just as a kind of introduction, so gopher tortoise and silviculture. So by silviculture here, I mean pine plantations. So as you probably all know, the majority of tortoise populations are on private lands, and many of these populations many of these lands are either owned or managed by timber companies, and these are a major resource we really need to look into for conservation of the species, because public lands alone are not going to be good enough. So just like, again, probably just already know this, but some silvicultural practices can be detrimental. So a lot of times you have fire suppression, you have high basal area planting or incidental take, and a lot of the problems you have is you're closing up your mid-story, sunlight's not reaching your understory, you don't have forage, forbs for forage, and you don't have these open areas where tortoises can come out and thermoregulate. But however, previous research has shown that silviculture can be beneficial. So a big part of this is that you want to control the competing vegetation. So you want to control the mid-story oaks, and other unwanted plants that can't compete with your trees. So this can be done with prescribed fire, herbicides, and mechanical removal of these trees. And of course, when trees start growing too thick, they do use periodic thinning to open those up. And this is an example of that on one of my sites. So they came in and thinned a few years ago. That's a row they pulled out trees from, and a tortoise has just set up shop right on that row. My study questions as a whole are: how do gopher tortoise populations respond to this active forest management, and what biotic and abiotic components are correlated with tortoise presence? Sadly, I don't have much analysis done yet, so everything I'm going to talk about today is going to be preliminary and pretty much just looking at movement. So objectives, again, compare differences in population densities and demographics, identify potential locations appropriate for specific management. So that would be like areas that really need prescribed fire, really need to be thinned, things along those lines. And then develop best management practice guidelines for vegetative control, and potentially establishing management units on working forests to minimize impacts of the tortoises from forestry operations. So our study area, so I have two field sites. One is up here in Perry County, Mississippi, and the other is down here in Washington Parish, Louisiana. Just to note, this is the threatened portion of the range. So these two sites both have had previous studies done there, so there's marked tortoise populations, and they have differences in management strategies. So part of this property in Mississippi used to be is set aside as a management unit for kind of mitigation purposes. And the site down here in Washington Parish, I'll also call Ben's Creek. So it used to be a WMA that was managed by the state, and at one point in time, it was one of the largest tortoise populations in the state of Louisiana. There it goes. So for this project as a whole, we're doing a variety of methods. So burrow surveys, vegetation surveys, tortoise trapping, and gopher tortoise telemetry. So for my burrow surveys, I'm using a modified line transect distance sampling technique. So we're using transects that are 200 meters apart and 200 meters long. We kind of use this just because there was too much land to cover, and I had no chance of being able to do it if we used a different method. So for this, we're using 2 observers. Again, one observer walking the center line while the other observer looked for burrows on both sides. Then when we found to survey burrow, we marked it, gave it an activity status, and then scoped the burrow to determine occupancy. So along these same transects we're doing our burrow surveys, we're also placing vegetative plots. So these are 30 meters in diameter and 50 meters apart, as you can see here. So at each of these points, we took measurements of percent cover, understory percent cover, or overhead percent cover, understory percent cover, basal area, so we measured the DBHL of the trees within the plot, and vertical vegetation structure with the nuts board. As with the limitations with any project, we're going to be using some remote sensing data to really get at the abiotic factors influencing habitat selection. So we're going to use the Surgo data set and a national elevation data set to get at things like percent cool soil composition, drainage connectivity, elevation, slope, and so on. For trapping, of course, if there was ever a tortoise just running around our property, we'd run up and grab it and process it right quick. But for most of our captures, we're using these 2 trap designs. So we have here in picture A, a tomahawk live trap just placed over the burrow, and you can't really see it. There is a tortoise inside here. But the other trap design we use are these homemade flap traps, and how they work is they kind of just sit over the top of the burrow. So when the tortoise enters, the flap kind of pushes open and hopefully shuts down behind him if it works right. And when a tortoise was captured, we processed it, including taking sex, like I said before, age when possible, just a general health assessment, weight, a few measurements, and marked it. And then we just released it after that, unless we decided to put transmitters on it. So for our telemetry, we put VHF transmitters to 19 individuals with approximately a 50% sex ratio. So this is a VHF transmitter here. We attached both of these transmitters using a putty epoxy. And then we also use, and I'm going to give a shout out to Ashley and Lance at UGA Applied Wildlife Conservation Lab, who collaborated with me and let me use their design here, because I would have never thought of this. So this is a modified sports tracker. So it takes GPS data points once per hour. And I like to call it a cheater logger because the website we purchased it from had everything you might want to catch your significant other in infidelity. So we attached these to a subset of 10 individuals, 5 males and 5 females. I guess it works better. So just as an indication, like I said, preliminary results from our burrow surveys. So this is our site in Louisiana here. As you can kind of tell here, pretty much all of this is a power line right away going directly down, and then a gas line on the bottom here. And that is primarily where we're finding all of our tortoises. There are a few within these forest stands, but those are generally not as active or not as many individuals. And some along roadways, but the ones along roadways, we're not seeing burrows actually within the forest stands. And then here, this is our forest site in Perry County, Mississippi. So another thing, these are 2 completely different sized tracts. That one's 13,000 acres. This is like 200 acres. But what I want to note here is that this is a large sand hill here where they used to actually pull out sand, and there's just a huge cluster of burrows here, another cluster here where there's another sand hill, and then up here was this northern section. They thinned it about 3 years ago, and the surveys done prior to that said that there were only a couple burrows in there, or a couple tortoises, and we've captured a lot of tortoises and seen a lot of burrows up in there now. So thinning does seem to have helped the tortoises be able to move into that site. So just as an overview of my tortoise capture, so I captured 32 individuals at Vince Creek, 44 at the Perry County site. And the sad thing about this is this Louisiana site does not have any juveniles or subadults. I did find nests, but those nests were depredated. So right now, I'm not seeing any evidence of recruitment into that population. And the other thing to note is both of these populations seem to have a high male to female ratio, but I kind of think that's just because males are easier to catch, just because they're running around on site more. So for our home range, we used a minimum convex polygon and just did a simple t-test to look at the differences between males and females and between our sites. So as you would expect, males have a higher home range than females, and this is statistically significant. And I mean, of course, that's because tortoises are moving around on the property. Males are looking for females at all times, so just goes, kind of fits in. But we didn't see a significant difference between sites, even though there were differences in how they're moving on the site, which I'll show here in a minute. So for tortoise movements, so again, this is our Louisiana site, and these are all different individuals, each of these clusters. So the ones on the power line right-of-ways here primarily stayed on the power line right-of-ways. We didn't see a lot of movement into those forest stands. Same with the gas line here, and this guy on the roadway over here, he just stayed up and down that road. Whereas here at our other site, we did see some movement off property into some pastures, but this is one male right here who was just cruising all the time, looking for some women. That's all I can figure, because he was seriously just getting it all. But anyway, so he moved throughout this forest. He was just moving throughout this forest stand, and there's a male down here and female too. That you're seeing a lot of movement within the forest stands, whereas here you're not. And just to zoom in on the Ben's Creek site to show you a couple more things I found interesting. So like I said, this female here just keeping on this power line, not really moving away from it. So this was a male we had within a longleaf pine stand, and what was interesting to me is that there were clusters of burrows on both sides of that. And to me, it looks like he's actually walking to the road and walking the road to get to the other cluster instead of walking within that stand, which is just kind of goes to the shape of how thick some of those stands are, just completely covered in rubus. This is another female I wanted to point out because it was interesting to me. So I initially captured her in 2017 here. In 2018, I recaptured her here. And I was like, that's crazy that she moved 800 meters, so I put a transmitter on her. She stayed here and laid a nest that summer, and then towards the end of the summer, moved back to the power line. So it's kind of making me wonder if there might be some possible just movements due to reproduction, trying to move to better areas to lay nests. And this is the most insane thing that happened. So this female... I caught her here in 2017. She stayed every time I tracked her with the radio transmitter. She was in the same exact burrow. Every time for a whole year. And then I lost track of her when I came back in May to start my second field season, and I could not find her. Then we got a call. My advisor said, someone said they found one of our turtles. So she was in someone's backyard over here, 3 kilometers away. Oh, what is that? So she was in somebody's backyard here, and then and like I said, if you followed this road and followed over here, that is a distance of 3.4 kilometers. But she ended up right here on the side of the road. So I kind of joked that she moved up in life because she went from a dirt road to a paved road, but at the same time, I'm just so worried that she's just going to get hit by a car here. And if anybody has any theories about this, please talk to me later. I don't think I'm going to have time for questions. So just as a quick discussion, like I said, no successful recruitment observed at Ben's Creek. tortoises are moving and using those denned areas, so it is an indication that active forest management alone may be beneficial to tortoises. However, I still think that specific management is needed. Primarily, we really need some prescribed burns. We need some real control of that mid-story. And next steps, I'm going to examine population densities and demographics, determine kind of the abiotic and abiotic components correlated with tortoise presence using resource selection, and try to create a predictive model of resource selection that can be used as a tool for the management of these forest stands and potentially other tortoise populations by a warehouser. So with that, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who gave me money: Warehouser, National Area Stream, Mississippi State, Alabama Department of Conservation lent me traps, and my 2 technicians who put up with me and some terrible forest conditions for 2 summers. And I know I don't have time for questions, but
We can find you at the break.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.